Hello and welcome to Windows in Time Lost Oregon Ski Areas, presented by Jackson County Library Services and the Southern Oregon Historical Society. I am Leah Pastizo, Digital Services Specialist. This program is being recorded, so please mute your microphone and turn off your camera to ensure quality recording. There will be a time to answer your questions at the end of the program. Jackson County Library Services acknowledges that its libraries are located within the traditional lands of the Shasta, Tacoma, and Lakgawa people, whose descendants are now identified as members of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians and Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, as well as of the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians and Modoc Nation, who were forced to relocate to Oklahoma. We take this moment to recognize the indigenous peoples whose traditional lands are where residents of Jackson County live today. JCLS is committed to fostering understanding, deep respect, and honor for Indigenous people, and we encourage you to learn more about the land you reside on. For more information, go to jcls.org/land. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Jackson County Library Services. And now I'll hand it off to our presenter.
Today's speaker, Steve Stenkamp, is descended from a family whose grandfather homesteaded in the Bend area. He grew up in Bend, but he attended and graduated from Southern Oregon University. He has spent the last 6 years in researching this topic of lost Oregon ski areas, and it's being published by Amazon as a book, which is coming out, we hope, next week. So you get a sample of it. And I think with that, I'll pass it.
Thank you.
The baton over to Steve.
Anyone inside have a problem hearing me? Quiet. How about on Zoom? You got me?
Yeah, you sound good.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for coming to me. First question is, why Lost Oregon ski area? I go back to when I was a kid and I get the brochures of skiing at these places like Tomahawk or Arbuckle. And I always thought, well, I was fascinated with these little ski hills. I was a child whose parents did ski, so for me to go skiing, my mother was very gracious with her time to run me up to Bachelor. But I had to kind of find my own little posse, if you will, to be able to go up and go skiing. So I was always traveling, looking at these different things. And then probably in the 90s, with the advent of the internet, you started finding these little websites about lost ski areas, and that fascinated me. And there was actually books out. There's a great book on Colorado ski areas, the New England Lost Ski Areas Project. A gentleman by the name of Jeremy Davis has done a great job of telling the stories of ski areas that no longer exist in the New England states. Ski the Great Potato in Idaho. Got a great book of all the stories of Idaho. Well, I saw this little website on the lost ski areas of Washington, and it had a little box that talked about ski areas in Oregon. And I looked at it and went, yeah, that's in the wrong spot. Yeah, north of Burns. Are you kidding me? And then I kind of looked through all these and I went, yeah, some I was super skeptical of, some I knew. But it triggered something in me. It's like, well, you look at the internet, there's all these different lost ski areas. So I thought, well, maybe I could do that. And the old adage of everyone needs a hobby. So there I go. When I first started, I thought I might find 20, 25. And today I'm up to 58 different spots for skiing in Oregon. And my criteria was really pretty simple. It had to be a place organized for downhill skiing. Didn't have to have a lift necessarily. It just had to be a spot where people would get together to go skiing. You'll notice the first 4 ski areas you have there with the asterisk on it, that is community or not-for-profit ski areas. You here in the Rogue Valley have this great asset, Mount Ashland. I really like the way they operate. Their last 2 general managers, to me, have a fondness in my heart just because they're kind of blunt, direct, and I love someone that says, today's a crappy day, don't come skiing, as opposed to the marketing folks that go, well, if you have the right rain gear, it might just be a wonderful day to go skiing. And really kudos to them, because there's a lot of community work. And I follow a lot of these ski areas to their social media, and they're always looking for volunteers that are supposed to show up, and people have lives and things change. So really appreciate the fact that we got 4 community ski areas in the state of Oregon, 2 of which, Ferguson Ridge and Warner Canyon, are the only 2 ski areas in the state that aren't on Forest Service leased land. They're on privately held land. Now here's a partial list of the ones that I have found so far. And there's a couple exceptions. We got Dixie here again. Again, I don't know whether it's lost or found. And we'll talk about that again a little bit later. And then Spout Springs. Spout Springs is in northeastern Oregon. It ceased operating after the 15-16 ski season. The owner of it got into a dispute with the Forest Service. He didn't open for 5 years, which is a clause for them removing their permit, which they did. And now the process is the Forest Service has to buy his assets. He thinks his assets are worth this much. Forest Service says, no, they're probably worth this much. And so the lawyers are going to battle that out. But my best guess is that there'll be some sort of announcement probably later this spring. And it wouldn't surprise me to see Spout Springs running again for the 25-26 season. If you look at a map of Oregon, and again, this isn't all of them because if I had all of them on there, you wouldn't be able to read any of them. But most of them are on the Cascade Crest. We got some down the Rogue Valley and in northeastern Oregon. So skier groups were really important as far as formulating these areas to go skiing. And this came out of the Bend Bullet in 1922, where they normally skied Lava Butte, which is about 15 miles south of Bend. But there was too much snow, the highway wasn't open, so they started skiing Pilot Butte. The one thing about the old skiers is skis weren't set to your ability, to your weight. There wasn't those DIN settings that now all bindings are set to. So it's basically, hey, buddy, you want to go take a run? Use my skis. And I love it where they said there was 20 pairs of skis were in use for most of that day. Rescue groups were also really important in starting some of these ski areas, the Mazamas, the Obsidians, and the Skyliners. And all 3 of those organizations ended up having small downhill ski areas that they sponsored. And the recreational groups, and just about every community in Oregon had some small group, some large group of people like-minded that wanted to go skiing. And you can see the Mazamas, the Obsidians, and the Skyliners out of Bend, the Oregon Trail Ski Club out of Pendleton. So when you say Pendleton, you kind of think roundup and ranching and things like that. The terms Pendleton and skiing don't quite mix like Bend and skiing or LeGrand and skiing. However, they had a pretty popular little ski club for a while. My favorite out of all these, and I've accumulated about 70 different recreational or race groups that were involved in skiing. But this one right here, when I first saw it, this is a group out of Corvallis. I thought it was something from the Nordic regions, like Holunski, great ski or something like that. No, it's hell on skis. So Roosevelt's New Deal created the CCC and the Works Progress Administration. This is what land management agencies needed to attract more people in to go skiing. They wanted people to recreate in the winter. They had lots of people in the summertime, but they wanted to create opportunities in the winter. They didn't have the funding or the manpower to be able to do it. So with that, a lot of the ski hills were founded based on either work progress work or the CCC. Rope tows made a big deal as far as skiing. You didn't have to hike up just to ski down. Now you had a way to get up the hill. So, and I did poach this picture on the left from Ski the Great Potato, but basically it shows you all you had to do was have an old vehicle of some sort, and you ran the rope through the drive axles and you fired it up, and next thing you know, you had a rope tow. But there was a gentleman up in Seattle who owned the Sweden Freezer Company, and Sweden freezers were really popular with restaurants, not only for freezers, but they had milkshake machines and several other things that they built. But he was a skier and he wanted to go ski where he wanted to go ski. So he developed the Sweden Speed Ski Tow. Toboggan mounted. It had 2 different size motors. It had a rope that was already pre-spliced to the length that you wanted. And you walked up, you put the anchor in, and the rope tow would pull itself up to the top. And then you had this rope tow set up just about anywhere you wanted it. Now, somewhere I know someone has one of those motors in their shed or in their basement or in their garage. So if anyone has pieces or parts to a Sweden Speed ski tow, please let me know, because I would like to restore one and then let it go travel around the various ski museums in the 11 Western states. With rope tows, also, you had to have a pretty good grip to hang on to them. So this is a gentleman in the East Coast that developed this ski tow belt. So you put it around there and you took the little metal handle and you flipped it over the rope, you squeezed it together, and all of a sudden up you went. When you got up to the top, you had to release it slowly and you had to flip it over the rope tow. And that process is why these were nicknamed the nut. Now, here's a primitive one. This came from the Deschutes Historical Museum, and this is a hand-built rope tow gripper. So that's canted a little bit. You set it over the rope, and as you pulled back on it, it would pull you up the rope. But now you got this club in your hand. You know, you put it in your back pocket. But it was really handy for when you got back in line, because you could just get them out of the way. It was kind of like an early version of an express pass. If I start telling some of the stories, and obviously I don't have enough time to tell all of them, which is probably to your benefit because you'd all be asleep after a very short period of time. But we'll go to the central part of the state. And when I talk about ski hills, people always ask me, what's some that are unique? Well, a lot of them to me are unique, but then again, I've got this kind of weird thing of what I think is neat. But the Forest Service built a small ski area outside of Idana. And they started in 35. They built a nice shelter. They cleared some slopes, not a lot of vertical feet, but still with an opportunity to go skiing. Well, it wasn't until February of 36 that they had enough snow. And to celebrate the opening of this little ski hill, they sponsored a train out of Salem, and they sold 835 tickets to ride the Snowball Express in 1936 to go ski at Idana. Now, Idana operated, obviously, the base elevation 2,000 feet. Snow was a little sporadic. And there were more ski areas being built up at Sandy Am Pass. So people kind of passed on this. And in 1941, there was a fire that started in one of the mills, burned up the hillside, burned up the remains of the ski area. This is one of about 10 that I haven't been able to stand on the exact spot where it was located, because the fire has removed all traces of it. I do know what section it is because there was a 160-acre parcel that's surrounded by private ground in that area above Idana. Somewhere in those 160 acres is where the ski hill was. Sandy Am Lodge, this was a direct result of the CCC project. When it was first being built, they called it the Hoodoo Lodge. And it was the Hoodoo Lodge because people parked on the highway. There was no road into Hoodoo ski area. So people parked alongside the highway, and then they either had to get skied in, or Ed Thurston, the founder of Hoodoo, built a little snowcat that he would haul people in for a 10-cent fee if you didn't want to ski in. But as they started progressing, they realized that was kind of a confusing name, and they called it Sandy Am Lodge. And this was a place where people could overnight. They had a kitchen, and they also had their own rope tows. They had two different rope tows, one of which is on the right side, and the other is on the left side of the lodge itself. The gentleman in the middle, that gentleman's name is Bill Louderback. And about 15 years ago, I'm at a little social gathering during Christmas, and I'm chatting with this gentleman who said he was pretty proud that he was 92. And he started telling stories about all of his outdoor adventures. And he was a fascinating guy to talk to. And so a couple years later, when I started this project, I posted on my Facebook site this picture. And the person that hosted that, it goes, "That's Bill. You monopolized him in the kitchen. He never once said anything about skiing. And had I known, I would have picked his brain." And the sad story about this is that apparently when he passed away, a lot of his pictures of Sandy Am Lodge disappeared. He was really good friends with Ed Thurston at Hoodoo, and they worked really well together. Ed Thurston was a MacGyver guy. He could make bread out of a piece of watermelon. But they worked really well together, and they put together a little package in 1947 where, so the day after Christmas, you could go up to New Year's Day. You got 2 meals, breakfast and dinner at Sandy Am Lodge. You could use the tows at Hoodoo, and then you could come back to Sandy Am Lodge where you spent the night, and you could also night ski there, and for a grand total of $24 a person, and that's a pretty good deal in any era. Currently, the lodge is being restored by a couple from Eugene, and they've taken it back to the original. The blueprints for that building are still available, and so they're taking it back to how it was originally designed. They made it some changes with the front entrance and things like that. But as I was walking the site, this little thing right there, one of the joys of this thing is to find cool old rusty stuff, and that right there defines cool old rusty stuff. What you have there is this was mounted about 30 feet up in a tree, and it was actually that's a Model A front axle, and it fit a 19-inch, and I know that because I have one. And the distance between the center of that and that little deal is the equivalent of a 19-inch wheel. And so what that was it set up on the tree, and the rope would run on it back to the bottom, and it kept it out of the snow from building up ice and accumulated snow. But this little deal sat right in the side of the wheel, keeping it clean, so you didn't have more snow and stuff added to the rope, which is one of the difficulties of early rope tows, is that they would accumulate all the snow and ice and be harder to hang on to. This one was advanced too because it had an insulator, which tells me it had a safety feature on it, so that if you went too far, you got your sweater caught in the rope, which was not uncommon. You got your ponytail caught in the rope tow, which was not uncommon. It would stop the rope tow if you went too far, as opposed to get rolled around in the shivs, which did happen. So the Skyliner Ski Club out of Bend, they built their first ski area going up McKenzie Pass, about 6 miles west of Sisters. So they started in 1927, and they built a little lodge, they built a ski jump, they cleared a spot for downhill skiing, and then they also had a toboggan run. Toboggans were really popular in the 20s and 30s. It was something that anyone could do. It was relatively inexpensive. You could share it with your friends, and it was a great way to get out and enjoy some winter recreation. So they had this all built, ready to go, and this gentleman walks out and goes, "What are you guys doing?" "Oh, we're building a skier." "Not on my property, you're not." They thought they were on Forest Service property. They were on private property when they built this because of a surveying error. Luckily, this person was generous enough. He goes, "Well, I'm not using it." He goes, "It's going to cost you $1 a year." So he gave them a lease to operate their ski hill for $1 a year. The toboggan run, this one was about 900 feet long, and they would, when conditions were right, they would say that they had speeds between 35 and 40 miles an hour going down in this little wooden trough with the toboggan inside it. In 2017, the Millie fire went through there, and it removed a lot of the remnants of the ski jump. The foundation for the lodge is still there. You see there on the right. The one neat thing about, and I came out of the fire service, so I'm always fascinated by fire and all that kind of weird stuff. Again, I've got some weird hobbies, but as I was walking there, I never could find out where the toboggan run was. And so post-fire, I'm walking the ridge, and I look and I see this piece of ground that's lighter colored and it's straight as an arrow. I went, huh. Okay, so now all the vegetation's burned away, and I've got this really dark thing. It reminded me of all the old places where they had rope tows, because the ground would be so compacted, you never got vegetation growing on it again. Well, I measured it and walked it out. It was 900 feet, just like they said their toboggan run was. So one advantage is I was actually able to locate where the toboggan run was. Hand Lake, this too is a CCC project. They built the shelter. The Sitting Club actually restored it in the 90s, and so it's still standing today. Old shelters are out in the wilderness area. People always like to use them for firewood, which that knothead behavior I could never really understand, but that one suffered it. It was originally built as a ski patrol room and a warming hut. So imagine, you're trying to warm up after tumbling down the hill all afternoon, and you got some guy moaning and groaning next to you because he just broke his leg. But the problem with Hand Lake is that, and it was one of 5 ski areas on McKenzie Pass between Sisters and Belknap. But the road, they quit plowing the road right there at Hand Lake. And so if it was a busy weekend, sometimes people, instead of wanting to walk up the road, would just park on the other side of the road. So if you're one of the first persons to get up there to go skiing, chances are you're one of the last ones to leave until people started coming down the other side. We go to the eastern part of the state, and this is where I had some skepticism when I saw that original internet site. Idlewild High Desert Ski Area, 15 miles north of Bern. And again, when I saw that, I was really skeptical, but started doing some research, Google Earth. All of a sudden, I found this cleared area that was about 14 miles north of Burns. I'm thinking to myself, And then fortunately, I introduced myself to a Forest Service ranger, and she really liked the little project I was working on. It was pretty assistive in helping me. So the slope is actually still real skiable today. They did have a rope tow, which used various pieces of wrecked automobiles to keep it operating. And at the bottom, you have, again, another piece of cool old rusty stuff, which, based on it, the way it was set up, powered the rope tow at one point in time. They were done in the mid-'60s just because with a lot of these small hills, there was just a lack of interest in keeping it running, much like a lot of the not-for-profits have today, where people, hey, I've already done my time, it's someone else's turn, and no one steps up to the plate. A little bit further up Highway 395 between Burns and John Day is Star Ridge. Star Ridge was built in '39, again, with WPA money. They cleared the slope. And the old photos that I found of that, they didn't do a real good job of clearing the slope. So you had lots of trees to navigating around. And skis weren't as responsive, the bindings weren't as good. And so when I look at those pictures and see all those trees mid-slope, it just kind of makes you kind of shudder a little bit as far as what the early skiers had to do. This slope would be skiable today. The rope tow was on the left side of the run, right up through here. Again, you can see the compressed earth that I was talking about earlier. But when they shut down in '72, the remnants went to Dixie Pass. So Dixie Pass is east of Prairie City on Highway 26. In fact, if you look at this picture was taken at Dixie Pass. That's the warming hut that was at Star Ridge. The rope tow was a rope tow that was at Star Ridge. The motor and all that stuff are still there. And there's actually a couple of YouTube videos of people going up and skiing it. It used to be one of those deals. You showed up, there was enough snow, you put $5 in the till, and they'd left the thing. You just turn the switch on, and you had a rope tow to go skiing for a day. Talking to the Chamber of Commerce in John Day, no one there had any idea whether or not it was still operating. And the last time they thought it operated was about 3 years ago. So still don't know whether it's lost or found, and maybe perhaps this winter we can determine that for sure. Northeast Oregon State, northeast corner of Oregon State. The Blue Mountains and Lao Mountains had lots of people interested in winter recreation. The little community of Meacham, where the highway used to run through when the highway got relocated, a lot of you will drive between LeGrand and Pendleton and see the sign that says Meacham. Well, what's that? It was a little community. They were quite proud of themselves. They wanted to attract more people in the winter. So in '32, they built a small ski hill. And to celebrate that, they had a winter carnival. They had downhill ski races, they had slalom ski races, cross-country races, toboggan runs, and a jumping contest. Well, the winner of that jumping contest was a gentleman by the name of John Miller, who jumped an astounding 22 feet. And upon accepting his first place trophy, he put those same pairs of skis back on his feet and skied back to his home in LeGrand. And so this was the ski lodge right there in Meacham. It burnt down in the '60s after years of no longer being used. And I actually found a nice photograph of the inside of it. All that ground now is private property, and it took me a while to figure out exactly where the rope tow was at that when it was operating. In nearby Camella, which is along the railroad tracks, and the railroad tracks, Union Pacific tracks run right through here. It's about 5 miles from Meacham, but they too had a ski hill, but that was owned by the Oregon Trail Ski Club out of Pendleton. So they had rights to it. They built it, and the distance was 2,000 feet. So hanging onto a rope tow for 2,000 feet, that required a lot of effort to be able to get up to the top of a 500-foot vertical drop, hanging on to a rope tow. So as club members, they weren't financially able to do it, so they were gracious enough to let the general public go in for 50 cents a day to be able to ski on Sundays. Saturdays was for club members, Sundays was open for the general public. they went insolvent in 1940. They tried to keep it going again. They tried to sell it, but nothing ever happened, and it was ceasing to operate. It was one of 5 ski areas in the state that had lift serve, or not lift serve, but railroad serve skiing. We showed pictures by Dana. Meacham had a train, the same train that went to Mel. So you could actually get someplace by train, ski all day, and take a train back to Pendleton or Grand from here. The Little Alps had a gentleman by the name of Champ Bond who put the Little Alps together, and he was a big skier. Anthony Lake started in the late 30s, and with difficulties in keeping the road open, World War II, they ceased operations right after World War II. And Champ Bond says, I still want to ski. So he had a couple of ski hills up in the North Powder area, but he wanted a longer season, a little more variety. So he created Little Alp, which is on the highway up to Anthony Lakes. It's about 3 miles east of there. And he didn't like rope tows, he liked cable tows. Because cable tows lasted longer. You didn't have that problem with the ropes icing up. And so he was a big fan of using metal cable instead of ropes. Operated till 1966, but in 64, Anthony Lakes got kind of reinvented. People wanted more variety than what the Little Alps could have. And so they reopened in 64. And the biggest thing for the ski areas across the state was when then Governor Mark Hatfield in 64 said, ODOT's going to plow your parking lots because this is good for the people of the state, and it's also a good economic driver for the small communities that had ski areas. So in 64, ODOT's plowing the road up, so the ski area operators didn't have to worry about that expense. ODOT hired Champ Bond, who was a MacGyver, and he built his own snowblower to keep that road open, which basically ruined his business at Little Alps, and then Little Alps shut down in 66. Mount Hood area had several ski areas that no longer exist, as well as the ones that you're probably aware are currently there. The Mazamas had one, but one of my favorites was Red Devil. And Red Devil started as a toboggan slide. And this one, I mean, you can look right here. There's a tower that you climbed up, and then away you went. And it was really fast, to the point where they started having some problems with people getting injured. Well, they shut it down because of the liability, the person owner. Now I'm getting a little nervous about this. But the name stuck, Red Devil. And it was right next to Summit Ski Area, their government pass. Now it's called Summit Pass at Timberline. Timberline bought them. And so they kept the name Red Devil. It's kind of a cool name that goes back to that history. But in 46, someone put in a rope tow right there. This is Red Devil. So from this spot this way is Summit. And from this spot this way, or to the west, is Red Devil. And so Red Devil had a single rope tow, and then it had a double rope tow, which was a single set of towers, but you had ropes on both sides of it, so people could go up on both sides of it. And they operated until 1970, and then it was used for snow play. This area right now is employee housing for the post of Timberline. But you can see, this is probably not a super busy weekend, but and I do have pictures where the highway was just a mess of cars skiing at both of these little ski hills. Now we're going to come down here into the Rogue Valley and in the Klamath Basin for some ski areas. Crescent Lake, kind of on the north side of that, but I didn't know quite where to put it central, but I put it here. They operated a small hill at Crescent Lake, not one, but right there at Crescent Lake. And the Obsidian would sponsor ski training to go up and take people up to go skiing for the day. And on occasion, the Klamath Falls Ski Club, the Snow Clan, would sponsor training. So you had 2 trains sitting up there at the sidings, and you could have newspaper reports that anywhere from 800 to 1,200 people, depending on the weekend, would ride these trains up to go skiing for the day. Now, the Obsidian Club, and they also sponsored this with the Ski Loppers, which is another club in Eugene. But the Obsidian Club took it one step further, and they put a baggage car on the train. So at the end of the day, they would have a jazz band playing in this baggage car. And so you could come in and you had your jazz going, you could do your jazzing. And there's something about, if I'm kind of envisioning what this was like in the late 30s, everyone's wearing wool. So when you got into those rail cars, the humidity level probably was probably had a tint of mothballs to it. But just the idea of that, that humid and mothball and the jazz band playing and the tracks, and the clickety clack, and that's a pretty cool evening, I think. The ski hill is starting to overgrown, which is most of the ones I found, they've got anywhere from 40 to 80 years of timber growth and brush growth on them. But that slope is still existing. And this is a picture when it was in operation there on the left. Taft Mountain near Roseburg. So the Idlewild Ski Club out of Roseburg wanted to have a ski hill. So they looked at several different places. They settled on Taft Mountain. Forest Service was very accommodating. They put a timber sail out to remove all the timber on Taft Mountain, and away they went. They had two different rope tows, and I'm still trying to figure this one out. I've heard two at one time and then two different ones, but eventually I'll get that all figured out. And they actually added night skiing in the 60s, but it had pretty low elevation, and it was a county road, so they had to rely on someone else to plow and keep the road open. So there's weekends like they've got too much snow, we're not operating. And so you can see there on the right side, that's where the Forest Service had cleared the timber off. And a lot of these small areas, they were really optimistic they were going to go big time. And I found lots of them where, like Willamette Pass and Skyliners at Stumble Creek, where they cleared timber all the way to the top in hopes of going all the way to the top. But finances usually meant they ended up with a rope tow somewhere about halfway. And Taft Mountain was no different. And you can tell from the pictures, this one on the right, you can see kind of the rope tow runs right through here, and it's determined to be bony. In other words, there's lots of things sticking out of the snow, not what you would see skiing today. And the other picture on the left is one that came out of the newspaper, and two, it shows lots of rocks. But they had this little collection of huts. This was the kitchen, this was a ski patrol room, and they had these various little buildings. But low snowpack, difficult to get to. Vandalism was a big player in a lot of these old ski areas because the knuckleheads would come out and ruin everyone's fun. One of the things they did that was really cool is they had wash tub races. So they built a little course, and if your butt could fit in a wash tub, you could ride it down the hill. And so you got your favorite wash tub, and away you went. The picture on the right is what Taft Mountain looks like today. And I show that picture because you need to understand the limits of where I will go to find some cool old rusty stuff. And that's a thicket of brush that I walked about 5 feet into, and I was bleeding in about 3 different spots because I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and decided, nope, growing up, what I wanted to see, but I don't need to be walking into that kind of stuff. Tomahawk Ski Bowl outside of Clem Falls. Right about where I believe it's Highway 140 comes together, operated from 56 to 82. They had a pommel lift, which when Eugene Pomagowski came to Oregon, he was able to sell quite a few of these little pommel lifts. And it was just a single platter that went between your legs and pulled you up the hill. You didn't have to hang on to anything. So they had a really nice lodge. And then on the right picture there, you'll see this here is the rope tow that ran halfway up, and the pommel lift here runs all the way up to the top of the mountain. Tomahawk, having kind of a Native American theme, their 3 runs off the top there were Geronimo, Paleface, and Ugg. And now I kind of roll my eyes at it. At that point in time, I guess that was acceptable. And on the left, this is the top. Now it's the home of Crater Lake Zipline. So they don't like to let people wander around because they got people flying overhead. They don't want the liability of said flying overhead and what they might drop on people or etc. But from the top of where the pommel lift was, you look over and you can see Pelican Butte. And Pelican Butte was the spot where several different companies and groups tried to develop that into skiing. Not successfully. Union Creek, just east of Becky's, small ski hill. They're doing a lot of clearing now. There's probably more there to ski if you wanted to than there was, say, a couple years ago. CCC built the shelter, which was a single shelter, but then they tripled it up. So they had a shelter that's 3 times the size of normal. In the 90s, the Prospect Ranger District employees took the shelter down because the knuckleheads were out and taking shakes off and doing knucklehead things. And they rebuilt it on their own time, salvaging material from the old shelter, but then also milling stuff from nearby forests. The fireplace that you see right there that's still standing was original to the CCC days. Crater Lake. Crater Lake's got a pretty interesting ski history. Employees were skiing there in the late 30s when they figured out how to make a rope jump. They'd have a vehicle, they'd find a hill, they'd set it up when conditions were right. Sometimes they would just let people ski down, someone would drive down the road, pick them up, and they'd come up that way. But in 1940, there was a commercial application there. They went up what's known as Knob Hill, and they had this single little rope tow that people enjoyed. And when I see pictures of Crater Lake, I'm reminded of what difficult it was to go skiing back in the days. You're in the Rogue Valley, you had no idea what the ski conditions were like up Crater Lake. And so it was a leap of faith to load the car up and go up there. And then since Crater Lake, you couldn't do anything commercial, they had to sell tickets. Side park entrance, you just hope the station wagon that selling tickets was there so you could go up and go skiing for the day. Otherwise, you wasted a long trip. Yeah, you could go back down the hill to Union Creek and find a place to ski. But so now, if you go skiing at Mount Ashland, you can look up there and you've got webcams that are telling you exactly what is happening at that given time. You've got a real-time weather station. So that idea of the marketing folks kind of twisting the words a little bit, light winds in a large area, which means the trees are only going like this. You can determine ski conditions yourself. And I tell a quick story about my days working at Mount Patrick. We had a guy that was the night custodian, and he also was the person that put the ski report together at 5 o'clock in the morning. So he would set it up so that if it was an odd day, odd temperature, you didn't want to come up and go skiing. So if he said on the ski report 29 degrees, you didn't want to go skiing. And he just told his buddies, hey, this is really cool. So if it's odd temperature, don't come up. So his buddies thought, well, this is pretty good. I got insider information. I don't have to worry about the marketing folks or the twists or spins on whatever the weather's doing. So if it was odd, people wouldn't come up. Well, loose lips sink ships. So buddy told another buddy, before you know it, tell another buddy, and before you know it, a lot of people knew that if it was an odd temperature, you didn't want to go skiing. Well, it got back to the marketing part. So what's this about the odd temperatures? From now on, temperatures are going to be even. So his buddies that relied on the odd temperatures, oh, it's 32 degrees. Oh, must be a good day to go skiing because it's an even temperature. No. So the nice thing about Crater Lake, on the way home, you got to see a great view like that. One of the fun things of this project, this was actually a trail map I found of 1940 of Crater Lake ski area. And some of the land management agencies, the archaeologists have been really generous with their time and helping me out. And then in turn, I've been able to give stuff back to them that they didn't know existed, which to me, that's a win-win. The whole idea is to try to keep these stories alive. And so this map now is in Crater Lake's possession, which they didn't have before. And that to me is bonus. Marine Barracks Klamath Falls, built in 1944. This was to assist servicemen that had malaria, encephalitis, elephantitis, bloodborne diseases that they got, or what they used the term battle fatigue back then. And so it was a great place. It was designed for 5,000 people. You could go in there. The philosophy was pretty simple: work hard, eat well, play hard. So to that end, they had a small ski hill there. This is just outside of Klamath Falls. They had a small ski hill and had enough snow. They had a toboggan run that they built toboggans in a vocational technical because they also trained people for skill sets for once they left the military. Only operated till 46 because at that point in time, the war was over and they peaked out. Coming out of the fire service, having a lot of friends that not only been in the military, but first responders, I just happen to wonder whether or not a facility like this would be of value today with that same basic philosophy. Work hard, play hard, eat well. Trail camp, I love this story. This is up in the watershed above Ashland. So back in my student days, and I used to wander around a lot. I had a little pickup, so if I wasn't doing anything, I'd go wander around the hills, or I'd go here, go there, and I hiked a lot. And so I was up in the watershed, and I came across this little three-sided shelter. This is really neat. You know, it's got a little fireplace there, and so on occasion, on a Friday or Saturday night, me and a couple of my buddies, we'd go up there to study. And so we'd build a fire, and then of course we'd be up there studying. And we just thought this was a really neat spot. So when I started doing this research, and they talked about trail camp and then the shelter, I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if that's the place we used to go study at. So by memory, I tried going up to find it. Now, miserable, didn't have any luck, but a retired forester archaeologist, his name is Jeff Leland, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, was very generous with his time and kind of helping me where this spot was. So a couple years ago, I drive back up there and I park at Bull Gap, it's all gated off, and I'm walking down the road, and all of a sudden I started getting close. Oh, I remember that. And I was able to actually, 40-year memory, I probably won't be able to find my way home today, but 40-year-old memory, I found this spot, and I was like, just exactly as I remember. Little meadow. Occasionally they would set up a portable rope to one of those sweet ski toes. You try saying that fast 3 times. And you could go skiing. The difficulty was you had to go up Coleman Creek Road, which was not maintained. And a lot of times they were skiing a couple miles to go to the small little hill at trail camp. Now here's where you might be able to help me. So one of the there's a couple ski areas in the Rogue Valley that I haven't found. One was Star Gulch, which again, 80 years of timber growth, I probably never find it. But another one, the Rogue Snowman in 1931 built a ski hill and they called it Gala. And a lot of times the old things, you know, it was close reference. So I know there's a spot Dollar High a little bit further down the summit, but this was built north and west of Russell's Camp. So I've done a lot of research trying to find Russell's Camp. The only thing I can determine it was like probably a private campground, maybe a little lodge building or something that was there, but still haven't found the exact cause or the location of it. But they built it on property owned by E.T. Merrill. So I go into the county records and I find property owned by E.T. Merrill in that time frame. I really go down some rabbit holes on this project. But so I find several pieces of property. He had 4 large pieces of property, 2 down the valley, 2 up by the Siskiyou summit. One was way far east, and they talked about having power to it at one time. So I knew there wasn't power going to the east, but there was one going to the west. So somewhere in this area was the Rogue Snowman's first ski hill back in 1931. And if anyone has any information on that, I would certainly be interested in it. Andrew, who is the general manager of Mount Ashland, has been generous with his time to take some pictures of spots he thought it was. But if I figured out where Russell's Camp was, then I might be able to figure out where that first ski hill was. And look at me staying under time frame. So I do have a Facebook site and an Instagram, all under Lost Oregon Ski Areas. My chance of the questions.